Okay, right, we have a quorum, so we are ready to go. So we are going to resume the meeting. We have done items 1, 2 and 3. There are no petitions. There is public input. Claudia Baron. Welcome. And
hello.
Please introduce yourself.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Hello, everyone. I am Claudia Baron. I've spoken in the planning committee maybe in July. I can't remember. I'm a mother living in Ponsonby. I have a 4-year-old daughter in the Auckland Kindergarten Association at Freeman's Bay. I have a 6-year-old daughter at Richmond Road, and I'm currently a master's student of teaching primary at Auckland University. So I'm really active in the community, and as I started working on projects 2 years ago, I realized there's a lot of gaps as compared to what I'm used to in America in funding for city projects. So before I started my degree in July, I spent a month personally funding a research project in San Francisco and New York, meeting with CEOs of umbrella organizations that help grants. So I put together a little slideshow, which I did for the Waitemata in July, because I noticed they were still unsure how it worked. So I thought I could do it for you guys, just for some ideas of funding projects around the world, and specifically for Auckland. Is it working? Sorry. Oh, there. Is that the second slide? We have big aspirations for the Auckland. We want to help shape the future, but we understand that the council has limited funds and resources to complete these projects and reach these goals, so they're often at risk of being put on the back burner or shelved completely. Next one. If we look to the most thriving cities around the world, they are regularly and successfully harnessing philanthropic giving to reach community targets. This can offset budget shortfalls and satisfy public needs in urban growth. So these are some of the areas I went to. So I specifically went to the Parks Alliance and met with the CEO, and I also went to the New York placemaking. But this here is the London, just last year they had the role of philanthropy in building London's civic identity. So massive cities like London are using charities. So the Charity Aid Foundation, and specifically the City Bridge Trust, dates back to the year 1097. And it was created when they had a shortfall in bridge making. And now it supports charitable activity and quality grant making and clearly defined priorities. And another example is, this here is Pittsburgh. A charity paid for 400 planters around the city. So an individual charity just to help city living. So let's say you didn't have enough money as a council to add more funding for plants, a foundation can do that for you. This here is in Melbourne, and these are both in Melbourne, and this is the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. They build healthy, resilient communities and connect people, ideas, and funding. And this one in particular is a partnership between a landscape architecture firm and a charity. And then it's also happening in Hong Kong. So it's definitely on the cusp of being a very common way to find funding, and it's happening all over the world. It's not just American, it's Canada. Definitely the top 10 livable cities as by Forbes in the world are all doing it. And San Francisco in particular, which has, when I met with the CEO, he said 20% of all parks are funded by the council, 80% is by philanthropy. So you just have to make the 20% match, and it shows that you have care for the people, and the people, when they come behind it too, they watch it, they take care of it, because they funded it, and they volunteer their time. So it's an idea that's based off more transparency, but through that communication, you have collaboration that everyone is accountable for. So we believe that if we are going to reach our ambitious goals for a better, more livable Auckland, that we should aspire to create a welcome atmosphere and landscape that helps foster philanthropic giving to public initiatives and spaces. Also, it'll build community pride, and council will be able to complete more projects. I had another slide there. It's missing. Yeah, there was more. Yeah, one of them didn't load. So basically, I recently was in this room getting a Good Citizen Award with all the volunteer groups. Many of us cried because we give thousands of hours of free time. The MOTAP volunteers were amazing, the LGBT. So there's all these people here who give a lot of time. And for instance, you guys pay a little attention to engagement and feedback, but a lot of the working mothers, for instance, I found couldn't fill the form. I'd go around begging them with the iPad, telling them to fill out feedback, and then all you see is 80 people that fed back. When I spoke to 1,000 people, hand and foot, I have piles and I input it for them. So they can give feedback, but I'm worried next feedback loop after the LTP, I can't go hand and foot and do this. So it's a matter of a good way for people to show they care about projects to give money, because maybe they can't be there to fill out an application, but they can give $50,000 that says they want that to happen. So it's another way to communicate when people don't have time, but they have money. So it's really common. And so another slide that didn't load was in Wellington, or the Culture New Zealand. They did a pilot. So when they wanted to do more philanthropy for the arts, in 2010, Peter Briggs made a report. You can find it. It's called Growing the Pie. And they did Creative New Zealand funded $1 million to see how much fundraising could help for the arts. It's called the, it's a report, and it was a pilot, and it made $2 million after the $1 million research, but it showed that fundraising was a new and growing thing in 2014. So it's a full report, and the government of New Zealand did it. And so if they did that pilot, which was just a simple report, and they put $1 million in it, another opportunity here is this one, which I spoke to you about in the planning committee, is something that is not that expensive to back, to see how you could combine the 3 sets. So if you already own that land, you combine fiscal philanthropy with volunteerism, you would see if it's feasible in New Zealand. That could be a pilot, or just a general, as that's an idea. But definitely it's a growing thing in New Zealand. If you have any questions, I've spent 2 hours in New York City with the CEO of Project for Placemaking, Ethan Kent, who a lot of counselors have met here. But I realized when he was here, he had like 5 minutes with each counselor, or 10 minutes. So for you to learn about the process of foundations and how much contribution they can give to meeting budgets, there's a lot to learn in that, I think, for New Zealand. But it's very possible. And it was beautiful to go into the San Francisco Alliance, where they had a list of 10 parks throughout that massive city that had an opening, a volunteer planting event that was raising $1 million, and it's
Claudia,
all possible.
I'll let you run over a bit.
Oh,
so
sorry,
just need
I'm
to
done.
wrap
Yeah,
up.
that's it. Any questions?
Okay, right. Questions? Councillor Watson.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's an excellent presentation. Are you aware of any, and I think, for instance, I know one of the local boards were getting organisations like Spark to fund these great basketball courts that, you know, like,
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's, you know, kids love them, and they come, and there's obviously plenty of scope for that across Auckland. Have you had any contacts with the kind of potential New Zealand versions of what you've seen in San Francisco and New York?
Well, the best is actually Christchurch, and the pity about Christchurch is it's all based off a disaster. So the diversity and the flexibility and the risk-taking all comes from the fact that there's nothing to lose, which Auckland can learn a lot from that, because why should you have to have a disaster to trust your community? Because basically they had nothing to give, so they allowed young people to make new ideas, to add they added a washing machine, and they put a CD player on it for $1,000, and people danced every day just to feel good, and it brought the community together. And from that, the guy who did it, Gap Filler, has done like 10 real TED Talks all around the world. So Christchurch has a lot of good models like you're talking about. Auckland, not so many, because they are less, they feel like they could provide it, but as you run out of money, you need to start doing it before you have a disaster, and you foster these relationships with people you can trust, and philanthropists that see the gaps and give the money before the problem arises, and creates it. It grows. It only grows. It can only go one way, this kind of trust and relationship.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I just commend you on your presentation and what you're coming here to explore. And I suppose my question is to the Mayor, or to potentially an officer, is what confirmation or what hope can we give back to the speaker so that we're actually leading a piece of work that enables us to do more of what she is displaying. So I think as an organisation, and that's maybe to you, Mr. Chair, as well, you know, as an organisation we should be embracing this, and I would like to potentially, as a member around this table, absolutely support that. But I think we are doing some stuff around the space. We're beginning that work, and so I just feel that it would be appropriate, Matthew, even if it was you, to give her some reassurance that, you know, the fact that we're just not going to thank her and she's going to go. The fact is that we actually have embraced the sorts of things that she's talking about, and we will be developing those things.
Technically, it should be a question to the presenter, but we will bend the rules. So.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So look, through the chair, so it's hard not to sit here and be excited about what you can do with this stuff. So, I mean, you know, from a official's perspective, I'd take a fair bit of heart as to the reality of the appetite the organisation has. So I can get my head around how a lot of this works. We're large, and currently we've focused on some of the larger infrastructure items, but with a bit of a determination to think a bit differently and come up with different structures and platforms. But I think this space lends itself to plenty of, you know, of willing partners, and so I'm glad we've got Louise here as well. There is some technical stuff underneath this for us, where we're talking about community facilities and the ownership therein, but I wouldn't want this to put us off, and I think there are some models here that genuinely are win-wins, in the sense that they do create genuine budget headroom for council. We can extract real value out of the incentive that philanthropists are putting on the table. Part of the challenge here might just simply be our size and scale. So how you approach us and how you work with us, and I might ask Louise to kind of pick that up in a way that we can, we can get something repetitive happening.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair and councillors, first of all, thank you to Claudia for her presentation, because I think she did really highlight many of the opportunities that we have in Auckland to actually expand philanthropic giving. I have talked a little bit to Claudia about some of the things that we're doing already, certainly in the last year, focusing very much on testing out the appetite for corporate philanthropy, and so things like the 5 Spark basketball courts, the launch of the 2 ANZ splash pads that are just happening at the moment. And councillors, you may also be aware of our initiative with Vector around lighting up the harbour bridge in the new year. That's sort of really the tip of the iceberg, but certainly there is an appetite there to actually work with council and with community to do things for Auckland that perhaps we wouldn't be otherwise enabled to do. I think there's a lot of scope in the philanthropic area for us to explore further. Just 2 things here. One is that we do work with some philanthropic organisations at the moment. The Tyndall Foundation is being incredibly generous with the youth employment area, but also Foundation North around many of the community and sports facilities. Next Foundation, there are some others, but certainly there's far more scope there, and certainly in 2018 would like to explore that further. One last thought, and I think a really important model that Claudia raised was around community foundations, which are not just the big givers, but actually allowing ordinary Aucklanders to actually contribute to really good community projects.
Yes, so I just wanted to organise. When we spoke before I came here, I said my issue more than anything about corporate is letting people, us moms and families that want to give time and a little bit of money and have ownership of city spaces, this communication with you guys, because I feel like there's a huge divide between me wanting to come here, because this is my fifth, I got moved so many times while I'm in a classroom teaching someone else's kids, missing my own, to come for a half hour, and then they move me, and then I almost get kicked out of my university program that wants to teach because I'm trying to speak about commitment and community. So we're the missing gap. So between me and Louise, I just want to emphasize that family members and community and citizens would like to speak more with council about this possibility and also get money by doing it.
So just picking up on that, Auckland Foundation, which is on that community foundation model, is certainly growing, and I think a really important vehicle for ordinary Aucklanders to actually contribute through endowments, bequests, through other types of giving to some of these initiatives and projects. So look, just to finish up, just say that I'm certainly appreciative of Claudia, and we'll talk further after this around some of the examples and perhaps avenues that we can look at further. Thank you.
Councillor Cashmore.
No, it's been started right now, just then.
And Councillor Holt.
My question is a bit naughty, but I'll ask it. Would it be a good idea next year, when we are hopefully landing our LTP, to have a mini conference with our local boards, with our community organisations that are working in partnership with the philanthropic sector, and to actually come up with some practical funding projects that would give people, A, the idea of how this is done, B, give our philanthropic sector an idea of who to link with, and C, get some action happening on the ground along the lines of Christchurch, so that we can stretch our level of achievement in this area a little bit further. Might that be a useful thing to think about?
That's not naughty, that's great. That's nice, that's not naughty.
Yeah, that's the goal. The goal is just, we need to start somewhere, and so anywhere that educates the people that are voting on things that might not make it to the end block because they don't know about the different ways would be helpful, for sure.
Because, Mr. Chair, I think, as other councillors have said, there's a lot of examples in our local board areas where we actually have had amazing community networks do stuff without council getting in the way. Because the other focus for this little mini conference would be, how does council step out of the arena and not be in the way of some creative and good things happening, because sometimes that's the problem.
Well, yeah, I think my worry was because with the super city, I noticed once it gets over a certain amount, like 200,000, the board has no power. They have all the passion, and we have all the passion, and I've been to 20 Waitemata meetings, but once my project gets over a certain amount, I can be stopped, and we can all be stopped, and 100,000 votes and whatever, 1,000 people on foot means nothing if you guys don't understand that small areas, every board has a big project that they need everyone to understand how it can get finished by the community it affects.
Yeah, yes, totally.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claudia. Just to pick up the invitation from Councillor Simpson, we don't have the same tradition of philanthropy here that you have in the United States, but that's not to say we shouldn't be trying to develop those partnerships, and some have been developed and work really well. If you go up into the art gallery, you'll see millions of dollars of artwork given by Julian Robertson. On Friday, Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore and I open a splash pad in Stanmore Bay that's funded 80% by ANZ. Louise mentioned the Harbour Bridge, but so all of those things can be developed. The partnership to get good corporate citizenship,
Yeah.
but the other end of that is working with your volunteers and making things happen in the community. And that's the sort of thing we're trying to do with, for example, Million Trees program. The people of Auckland own the city. Let's give them a sense of ownership. Let's involve them far more than perhaps we have done so traditionally. So I welcome your ideas on that.
I spent like 10 to 20 hours researching everything but America because my accent tends to make people think
Gives
I'm
you
trying to
away.
make New Zealand America. So I found Toronto, and that's why I looked for Melbourne. Pretty much 6 out of the 10 Forbes cities are Australian,
Yep.
best cities, and they all use this model that is also American. So maybe America's, well, actually London started it, seeing as that foundation was in the year 1097. Americans do it just because they probably did the capitalism thing more, so they did philanthropy alongside quite well. But these other cities may have adopted models that they've taken from America, but Australia, Canada, the Auckland Foundation, it seems like took a lot from the Vancouver Foundation and the Toronto Foundation. So while Auckland Foundation, if you look at their website, looks very similar to the model of the Toronto Foundation, which is Canadian Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So it's not that I want to make this model, you to adopt an American model. I want you to adopt a global model for great livable cities, and it's a livable city thing more than anything else.
we'll adopt models that work from
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah, exactly.
No, no
So not,
prejudice.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just a comment, the NOSH site is a good one that perhaps you and the community could be working how you're going to do that, because that's been adopted as part of to go out for consultation for the Waitemata Local Board, and I'm sure if a number of millions could be found from somewhere else to help what is a $6 million project would be great. Just in case you didn't know, Claudia, I mean, the Class 4 gaming is quite unique in New Zealand, like Canada, and there's a tremendous amount of money. So in the West, Councillor Holson and Cooper and myself are aware that TDCF has given about 14 million to the Trust Stadium, 5 million to Teuru, 2 million to the Tafo Coastal Walkway. So, and in the south, Councillor Newman with Councillor Cashmore are aware of the Bruce Pullman Park, where many, many millions have gone into that from private philanthropy. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for the philanthropists that are keeping our arts sector from hemorrhaging, it would be hemorrhaging. So thank you very much. We have a mover and a second to thank you for your presentation. So I'll put that resolution. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Right, item 6 we're going to move to just before the disposals report, which will be 11. There is no extraordinary business, there is no notice of motion, and we are now moving on to an important item, which is item number 9, the assessment of expenditure incurred by Auckland Council.